It is Dave and Duncan back from Metal Epidemic for another review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new EP from Glasgow-based project Caustic Waves. The band's new EP, Full Circle, will be released on March 3rd. So, Caustic Waves, so I say band, this is essentially one person, a guy called Neil Thomas, who has been kind of building up his musical experience over the last 20 years. He cut his teeth as a guitarist in an alternative metal band called Keitel in the mid-2000s, and then switched to bass and backing vocals as part of the harmony-driven power pop band, the Chinaskis. I follow Neil on Twitter. He follows me back on Twitter. We got in a conversation about Catatonia just recently because we were at the Catatonia gig. He was also at the gig in Glasgow as well, and we were chatting about the gig and Solstafir and how bad they were. But
it wasn't that they were bad; they just were different.
Different bad.
There was a lot of people that dug it, Dave.
There must be. They've got.
There was a lot of people like a toe stamping, like hand clapping.
Hand clapping.
Yeah, a rowdy lot out there.
It wasn't for me. I was aware that he wrote and recorded music and stuff from his tweets, but I didn't realise he actually had something coming out in March. However, Neil was kind enough to send his new music our way to check out. I was a wee bit concerned, a wee bit worried sometimes when someone sends me something and I know who the person is, or we've had communication of some kind, just because I'd rather not shit on something that someone has poured a lot of time and effort into. I'd rather just not review it if I didn't like it, rather than be a prick about it. However, as I do when stuff comes in, I usually check out one of the singles just to see, what it's like. And I thought, okay, this could be interesting. Maybe actually just we'll stick this in the review pile and check it out. So this is a 6-track EP recorded by Neil over about 18 months at his home studio in Glasgow. And after mixing, it was then given a final polish by a mastering engineer called Andrea Gobbi at Carrier Waves Mastering. So after a busy year of promotion throughout 2022, the release of the Full Circle EP is really the conclusion of the first chapter of Caustic Waves. However, it is far from the end. Neil is already hard at work writing songs for the next chapter. So, for an EP that's been written, performed, recorded by one person at home, I kind of dug this, to be honest. If I didn't know he was from Glasgow, I would have said this is probably an American band. Off the bat, I couldn't hear anything that was particularly Scottish about it at all. And it sounds like a band. It's very tightly performed. I wouldn't have guessed it was one person behind this. From the kind of performance to the instrumentation used on the recording. It doesn't sound like just like a guitar or bass has been plugged straight into an interface and been recorded. It doesn't sound like a bedroom recording. It sounds very well produced. The guitars have got plenty of life, and the bass, sits very nicely in the mix with its own little lane as well, so you can hear a lot of the little bass licks and stuff. And that, that's the other thing, that the playing on this, from the riffs to the bass, the drums, they're all of a kind of very high standard. He's very well versed in each instrument. There isn't one that I felt it was kind of lacking or subpar. The bass especially impressed me. It doesn't just just stick to the kind of the root note of the guitar chords. It will often let the bass lines wander a bit, but a little bit more experimental. So I quite enjoyed that. Style wise, this kind of for me, it kind of sits within a kind of late 90s, early 2000s kind of alternative rock. There's a little bit of new metal in there, a little sprinkling of kind of post-hardcore as well at times. There are clear influences. I will say that straight away. You will get a little whiff of Incubus or Far, maybe a bit of Finch. I could even hear a little bit of kind of latter day Taproot in there as well. And he kind of wears those on his sleeve. You'll hear those kind of similarities fairly quickly. But I didn't actually mind it at all. A lot of those bands had points in their careers where they were like on top of their game, like releasing what I would consider like classic albums, and then most of them went through some, not so great phases, where the quality wasn't quite as good as it had been in the past. This EP kind of took me back to when that time where these bands were really good. Like, this is a real kind of nostalgia about it, and I thought the hooks on the EP were particularly good, which is kind of what I want from this type of stuff. I want it to end with me kind of humming along to a melody or singing a lyric in my head, and that's what this did. The tracks, I feel, are well written, well arranged to keep you interested, and they give you a lot of hooks. Most of the tracks, but between 4 and 5 minutes, good energy. The riffs aren't overly complex, but they don't really need to be honest, for this style. They provide a kind of heaviness and the drive, while the bass actually gives you a lot more kind of interesting runs, kind of a la Incubus, or even a little bit of Glassjaw on the bass as well. So there's always something kind of going on underneath the guitars to keep you kind of thinking. And the drums are, just kind of giving a kind of a backbone and a kind of groove to the tracks. But what I actually really enjoyed about this, as well as the bass, because I think the bass playing is really good, but I think the vocals are actually up there as well. I think the vocal melodies and the lyrics are really what stood out to me on this EP. Tone-wise, it's very clean, very well thought out, and the harmonies are very well placed to kind of elevate, like a big chorus, or even just to kind of thicken a kind of standout line. Reminds me, like, at times I could hear little hints of like Brandon Boyd, or even like a Doug Robb from Hoobastank as well. There's a little bit of that in there as well. Lyrically, I thought there were a lot of kind of high points in this. I think he's a very good lyricist, actually. Does a really good job of kind of pairing up a kind of hooky line with a really catchy melody. And after a couple of listens, I was kind of singing along. I really liked Invisible Enemy for that reason. It's about COVID, and there's a lot of stuff obviously out there just now that's about COVID, and kind of living in that kind of uncertain time. But I like the fact that even though it's a subject like that we're kind of tired of hearing about, he kind of made it relatable and memorable as well. I thought it was one of the most memorable tracks on the release. Same with Regenerate, which it's got a kind of early 2000s Incubus kind of guitar. Reminded me a little bit of Nice to Know You from Morning View, but vocally completely different, and again very catchy. The chorus repeats just enough times to kind of leave an impact on you. I think it was track 5, Idiocracy. I think that one, the chorus maybe wasn't quite as memorable on that one, but what I did quite like is the kind of contrast on the track, because before that track there isn't really a moment where the EP has any kind of downtime, but I like they added something that almost kind of reduces down to just clean guitars, some vocals, a little bit kind of light cymbal work, and then it kind of builds back into a climax. It has some really nice kind of harmonies as well, and the bass playing again is a bit more kind of progressive, a little bit more playful. I don't think there's anything here that's necessarily groundbreaking. There wasn't anything that really like caught me off guard, but I think it's very well done. I wasn't bored by any of it. It kept me hooked in, and even though it's 6 tracks, it's still like 28 minutes. So we've reviewed plenty of albums that are over quicker than that this year. So it didn't feel like it was like cut short, which I often feel with EPs. I'm not a huge EP fan, if I'm honest, but this still felt like fairly substantial. I like this enough that I'm kind of excited to hear what happens next on the next phase. The guy's clearly got talent. I think he's done a really good job on his own, from the playing to the recording to the mixing. I don't know if he has any plans to play any of this live, or if he even has a band. I'm not sure, but I think it's good enough to take to the live stage. I would definitely check it out. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. And just finally from me, I just want to thank you for sending a well-made press pack, because you have no idea, like no idea how many bands will send us stuff for review, and I've got to fill in all the blanks, basically. Like MP3s that are not tagged, there's no metadata, you've got to copy and paste their bio from their fucking website, or hunt for Bandcamp links. So I appreciate that you sent everything, all tagged, documented, links, the whole lot. So I appreciate that, because you've no idea how many bands just send you the absolute bones or something. So what about you, Duncan? What did you think of this one?
Notwithstanding the fact that you've just shamed a lot of talented musicians that don't understand metadata.
Well, if you've not got a PR company, then fucking get one, or do what this guy does.
If you are a musical genius who's writing incredible songs and doesn't understand, I don't know, Word or metadata, still send us your music. Fuck Dave. Don't let him put you off. The bureaucrat in him coming out. I'm maybe not as high on this as you are, but there are plenty of things to celebrate here. I think one of the big kind of triumphs on this overall is how clear everything actually is. The production is excellent, specifically on the vocals. And whilst vocally overall, I've got a few issues, notwithstanding that everything is fucking clear. And on top of that as well, he's doing all his backing vocals as well. And he changes the inflection of how he does those backing vocals so it doesn't sound like the same vocalist doing backing vocals, which I appreciate. A lot of solo artists forget that, and then it's just layered versions of their voice, which is fine to an extent, but there is a part of me that feels like that's never going to sound that way live, because unless you clone yourself multiplicity style, it ain't going to work. But I really like that there's a kind of warmth and depth to the vocals, which, and that's partly due to the production. It's very, very, very clear. It sits very nice in the mix. It doesn't overpower anything, but at the same time, it's not underpowered by, or overshadowed by any guitar parts or any of the drums or the bass. Very much like yourself, kind of standout for me was, and you listen to these things, as soon as you get, once again, had you not told me in advance of this was a solo artist, I would have assumed a band. There's enough here in drum flurries and bass playing in particular where it sounds like other musicians have been involved. So to his credit, he's taken the time and not taken the lazy way out, which is guitar is my instrument, so everything else is just there just to keep up with what I'm doing on the guitar. There's plenty there to keep those kind of flurries through. I also think the song composition and length is good. I think he's got a good grasp on when something is getting a little too repetitive. Also, like you mentioned before, he sticks to a relative formula of coming back to those choruses enough, which makes sense to me because they are hook laden. So you get enough of them that they're memorable, but not too much that they become sickening. So I think that aspect is also done really, really well. I suppose the thing that maybe knocked it down a little bit for me overall is the dynamics on the EP. I feel that everything is very, not samey, samey's the wrong word, but I think it all sits very much within the same genre. And there are moments where he starts to add something in that I would have liked to have seen expanded a little bit more. Now, I'm not saying that every vocalist has to do something a bit more gruff, but his vocals are incredibly clean throughout the entire thing, that even when he's reaching notes that are clearly easy for him to hit in his range, I just felt like there was a bit more bass in there or something else going on, even if it is layering up another vocal in there just to add something else in, it would make it fuller. I also don't think in terms of even all kind of tempo it shifts that much. It's an EP, so I mean it doesn't have to by any stretch of the imagination, but also with an EP there isn't really any room to hide. There isn't there's nothing here that's filler, but at the same time I never felt anything on it was exceptional either. Now, you mentioned those influences before. If I go back and I listen to Morning View, right, Morning View for the most part is 80% ballads, 20% Incubus bangers, right? And that, but if you jump to the album before that, the ratio was maybe 60-70% Incubus bangers, but they obviously went down that road. And this kind of feels like he's already that far into his career that he's quite comfortable, and I'm not saying these tracks are ballads, but he's quite comfortable with the register and ranges he's got. I just never felt for the EP, for the runtime, there was any track that really took me away somewhere else, which you would usually get about the middle of an EP, and then something to pull you back in. It kind of felt like it all stuck relatively within the same register. Once again, this is one guy doing all this, and I barely play one instrument, let alone, the multitude that he does, plus record and all the rest. So I think overall, it's pleasant enough. And pleasant, feel it's a horrible word, right? So let me retract that. It's a well done EP, and it's very easy to listen to. Yeah. I wish it was a bit rougher in parts, but that's purely a personal taste. That's I can go back and listen to those albums from the 2000s, and all those bands you mentioned before had a bit of gruff somewhere in there, and I think that's maybe the only thing that's missing here. It's something not even necessarily to make it sound too raw, but this is very, very, very clean, and that is not my default. So I can't mark him down for writing that way. That's how he writes. It's more a personal preference from a listener. Yeah, but he's for a guy that's done this in 18 months, he should be immensely proud of himself, and he's got me interested enough that when the second EP comes out, I would totally check it out.
Yeah, for sure. I think I know where you're coming from. I think it worked okay for me on a 6-track. I think like a full album with that then might be a bit more difficult to kind of digest, and if there wasn't enough dynamics or a bit of change in intensity and stuff, I would get that there. Scores for this one. I enjoyed it. Like, I think it's well performed. There's a little bit of nostalgia about it. It's well recorded. My only very small criticism was the drum sounds. I thought were okay. You could tell they weren't live drums, obviously, but don't get me wrong, we've heard some terrible drum sounds.
Yeah, we know when someone's pressing a space bar. Right? So
yeah, we've heard some really, really bad drum sounds over the however long we've been doing this. These weren't too bad. And this just might be the kind of drummer and me being pedantic, but I think that aside, I enjoyed this. I thought it was solid. I thought it was catchy. I thought it was well written. I liked the 6 tracks, that length. I think it worked for me, and I'm not a big EP guy, but I enjoyed this. And every time I went back to it, it cut more and more into my head. The little choruses and little hooks and stuff were really good. I'll give it a 4 out of 5. I actually quite enjoyed this one, and I appreciate all the kind of work that he's put into this as a kind of one-man band. What about yourself? What are you thinking?
I'm coming in 3. Like I say, I think there's a lot to really appreciate here, and I think, and the last thing, just to link back with something you said, if you had to get me with a map and say where is this artist from, I would also have went straight to America. that very American sound about him, which is not a bad thing. That sells. The kind of regional Biffy Clyro Scottish accent thing doesn't always translate all that well outside Scotland. You would never know this guy was from Glasgow.
No.
In a million years.
He's maybe not Glaswegian. I've just assumed he is. Maybe he's not.
You told me he was born, raised, and bred in Glasgow. That was literally how you said he's the most Glaswegian cunt you've ever met online. So that might be a lie.
Maybe. Caustic Waves, Full Circle, drops on the 3rd of March. The EP is up for pre-order on Bandcamp stuff. I'll stick links below to the band's Facebook, to the Bandcamp and stuff, so you can check it out. Let us know what you think. Have a listen to some of the singles. Stick some comments below. Happy your thoughts and opinions on it. That is a review of the new Caustic Waves EP. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.